Melatonin is it's a hormone, and it's one of the only hormones that doesn't have a feedback loop. In other words, if you take it, you're not going to shut down your own production. What I discovered through my process of being sick with Lyme and mold for so many years is the core, most upstream aspect of health and disease. This core aspect that's constant throughout all disease is what I've come to realize is the most important thing to address to get people better at really fixed. What I found is that all diseases have one thing in common, which is inflammation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the community. So excited to be here today talking with Dr. John Lieurance. And if you haven't seen his stuff online or on one of our interviews in the past, you'll know him as someone who's worked for over the past 25 years as a chiropractic neurologist and naturopath. Is an incredible clinic that goes into regenerative medicine, if you will. It's down in Sarasota, Florida. His multidisciplinary clinic has a focus on alternative and regenerative medicine, naturopathic medicine, chiropractic functional neurology, functional cranial release, Lumone technique, Lyme disease, mold, illness, and other neurological conditions are treated there. But today, we're going to get into your book called The Melatonin, the Miracle Molecule, which you've been out there talking about obsessively for over a year. I'm so excited to find out more about melatonin today. Dr. John, thanks for joining us today and being part of our community.
Thanks, Dr. David. Yeah, I'm really blessed to be here and to just, especially to talk about this subject. It's so dear to my heart because, I was so sick for so many years with Lyme disease and mold illness. And when I started taking melatonin in the way that we're going to talk about during this interview, it was just life-changing. And I've seen it change so many lives. So the message of melatonin, of the ability for it to help heal your body beyond sleep, is really the subject that we're really going to dive into.
Well, I've been a chiropractor for 25 years, and melatonin's been mentioned here and there as far as going to sleep. Quite honestly, I went to the vitamin shop, took 3 milligrams of melatonin. Can't say it really made a difference in my life, and I just kind of moved on. And but what you're saying is that it's not just for sleep. Probably not taking the dosages that would make a difference anyway. So please tell me why you're so excited about melatonin. Why is it such this incredible, as you call it, miracle molecule?
Well, so before we jump into that, so let me just speak to what you just mentioned. So the research shows that oral melatonin, in other words, when you take it as a pill, is only 2.5% absorbed, because your stomach acid and your liver breaks it all down into its basic components that need to be put together on the other end of the liver. And so very little of it actually gets into your bloodstream. And this is very similar to a lot of more fragile nutrients like NAD. Everybody's talking about taking NAD for longevity and healing. That also, it doesn't absorb well. Glutathione, things like that. So when you start taking like a 3 milligram, it may not be enough to really start to move the needle. And so a lot of people, might benefit from taking higher dosage. But what I'm finding is that there's so much misinformation out there. And I'll give you a perfect example. If you Google melatonin, WebMD will be the number one search there, and it'll say side effects. I mean, right there, it's like it'll start going into side effects of melatonin: headache, nausea, dizziness, depression. So it goes into all the, and so a lot of people might think, oh man, melatonin might be kind of dangerous. But the thing that's a little bit irresponsible of them is that they're quoting the research where in the study, the placebo was the exact same as the people that took melatonin. So they're talking about these symptoms that people had that was basically the same as the people that didn't take the melatonin, and they're presenting it as if these are possible side effects. Whereas when you really start to dive into the research, which is what I did in this book, we have 22 chapters, and all kinds of different diseases that have been highly studied with melatonin, like liver disease, like diabetes, like cancer, like viral infections, and brain issues, degenerative neurologic disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, cardiovascular disease, infertility issues, hormone issues. I mean, we go gut issues is one. I hope we can talk a little bit about this because it's one of the most exciting aspects. But melatonin has been shown not only to help all of those conditions, but the researchers again and again speak to how safe it is and that there's no side effects.
Wow. So what is the mechanism behind melatonin? Is it made in our bodies? Is it a hormone? What is melatonin, and why is it that we're so deficient that we're having these chronic issues? Like what's the deal with that?
Great questions, David. So melatonin is it's a hormone, and it's one of the only hormones that doesn't have a feedback loop. In other words, if you take it, you're not going to shut down your own production, which is one of the reasons that it's so safe to take, because you'll still produce your own melatonin even if you take it exogenously. And there's no toxic level. They've done studies where they went up to 150,000 milligrams of melatonin, and they stopped the study because it's just the safety is there. So there's not really a lot of reasons to be afraid of melatonin as far as a safety standpoint. What I discovered through my process of being sick with Lyme and mold for so many years is the core, most upstream aspect of health and disease. And this core aspect that's constant throughout all disease is what I've come to realize is the most important thing to address with my patients to get people better at really fixed, right? And so what I found is that all diseases have one thing in common, which is inflammation, right? So the way I understand it, and this is going to tie into melatonin, trust me, just stay with me here. It's all going to make sense, but we have to give a little bit of backlog here so you kind of have to set the stage. So imagine that we have all kinds of different stressors, David, and all of these stressors will result in inflammation if the stressor exceeds the ability of the body to buffer that stressor, right? To adapt, right? So we have an adaptive capacity to sun, right? Eventually we get such a bad sunburn, right? And so the resilience of the skin to buffer the stress of sun is going to be a byproduct of melatonin. And I can tell you this firsthand. If I take melatonin the day before I go out in the sun, I don't even burn. Whereas if I don't, I will get totally crispy. And I've seen that with a lot of other patients that come back and say the same thing. So this is an outward expression of what I can visibly see on how melatonin is protecting my body. But the same thing happens with if you were to ingest a poison and how it would protect your gut. If you were to have an infection, melatonin would be there to protect. And it's always about the amount of inflammation that is produced, because this is the next thing that's really important to understand melatonin is that when your cells have a certain amount of inflammation, they hit that like, okay, I had enough. And they switch the way they're making energy from a very efficient way where, if people have heard of a mitochondria, right? So mitochondria is where you make the energy in the cell. Well, the mitochondria basically shuts down and said, I can't work anymore. And the work has to be done outside of the mitochondria, and you only get about 10% of the energy that you otherwise get. What's inside the cell to keep it from doing that is melatonin. And if you give melatonin, it'll switch it back to that more efficient energy production. And so this means that you have a stressor and you have inflammation, right? Melatonin's there to give you a higher resilience, a higher capacity to handle stress. And so this is something that melatonin decreases very drastically over our age. In fact, by the time you're 40, 50, it's like it's next to nothing. And it doesn't matter how great of a biohacker you are. You avoid the blue and the green light at night, and you get your your cool mattress and all these things that you can do, complete blackout in your room. All these things are important. Wi-Fi at night, those are important as well because they suppress melatonin production. But yet at the end of the day, we have much more stressors in today's world, right? There's a lot more stressors causing inflammation. So we need to buffer that more. And we just don't produce as much as we're older. So there's just no way to turn that clock back. So that's why I'm a big proponent to supplementing melatonin.
So what I'm hearing, I remember melatonin having something to do with skin tone and color. I remember that from school. But what you're saying is the human body, after a certain threshold of inflammation, of stress, the best thing is that the mitochondria and the melatonin are dealing with that. But once it hits a certain threshold, that shuts down. And I'm just trying to figure out from a physiological perspective, is that a protective, healthy shutdown, or is it just can't do anymore? And now you're going into a negative breakdown of the body without that level of melatonin where it needs to be?
Well, there's different postulations. It's kind of like a default emergency shift that the cell makes. They call it the Warburg effect, actually. Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for discovering how cancer works because cancer does the same thing. So with cancer, basically, you have enough toxin and infection and stress, which obviously toxins and infection create inflammation, right? So you have enough inflammation from stressors for a long enough period of time. You have cells that can't make energy normally, and they switch to this Warburg effect where it's called aerobic glycolysis. And again, you only make 10% of the energy. And so this is how cancer cells have to make their energy. And it's not something that you want happening in your body. And this is one of the reasons that melatonin is used by a lot of alternative doctors for cancer. I mean, my cancer chapter in Melatonin Miracle Molecule is one of the longest because the research is just, it goes on and on. And I think most people, when they pick this book up and they start reading it, you just can't believe that one molecule has such a profound impact on health, and B, that this isn't more well known.
This is surprising because of what I'm saying. If you're saying that most chronic diseases and inflammatory processes could be managed better with higher levels of melatonin, and nobody knows about this, nobody knows about this. Now I know why for the last year, and why you've written this book, why you've been on almost every YouTube channel there is, shouting from the rooftops about melatonin. So what you're saying is that, so we can't take in, how many 2 milligram capsules can we take? That's not going to work. How do we get these therapeutic dosages of melatonin in our body so we see a difference?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So we've been pioneering some different delivery methods. Just full disclosure, I'm also science advisor of a supplement company called Mitozen. And Mitozen, we make suppositories that is rectal absorption. And it's really super easy. I mean, it takes 2 seconds to put a suppository in, you don't even know it's there. And then the medicine basically is able to go as a slow release into your bloodstream over a long period of time, up to 5 to 7 hours. So it's almost like you're walking around getting an IV, right? So, and this delivery system is really perfect for melatonin because that's the way melatonin is normally released in the brain, is slowly, throughout the whole evening. We also have it in a liposomal, which helps with the absorption, and you get much better absorption than 2.5%. One thing that we're doing is we're going up to hundreds of milligrams with our patients. And there's a lot of controversy out there with this, and it's mostly because people are just not educated. So Russell Ryder, he's the guy that literally discovered, he was the first one to do a study to prove that the pineal gland was more than just a worthless gland in the 60s, right? And then he went on to be part of just many studies on melatonin. He's probably the most researched individual I know, scientist on melatonin. He's a PhD and an MD. He takes 100 to 200 milligrams himself every night. And so I've been taking even more than that myself for about 3 years. And it's been like, like I said, it's been transformational for me. And I've seen it really help a lot of our patients.
Wow. So I'm laughing because, as a chiropractor and a biohacker, forever. And I'm laughing because my wife has seen me eat activated charcoal and, take cold water submersion. So I guess putting a suppository in at night wouldn't really blow her mind too much, but yes, no. She's been through a lot.
Yeah. It's really no big deal. But if that's something that someone's not wanting to get in to do, the liposomal works really well as well. The product line is called Sandman, and we have 4 different versions. We have a Sandman and a Super Sandman. The Super Sandman gets up to 450 milligrams of melatonin, and the regular Sandman actually has something called glutathione. So it's been designed to really support sleep, although there's something called extra pineal melatonin, right? So this is melatonin that's being used in the body outside of sleep. So sleep is going to be focused in the pineal. But the extra pineal melatonin, like for instance, the gut produces 400 times more melatonin than the brain. And so the cells in the gut lining are on a circadian rhythm. So you have this circadian rhythm where you're awake, which is mostly driven by cortisol. So we release cortisol in the morning to get us going. It allows us to get to work and get things done. But just as important is that shutdown and rest and regenerative repair phase, which is when you sleep. And this is what a lot of people are suffering from. They're ramping up and they're working so hard and they're getting so many things done, but they're not balancing that with that deep, restful night's sleep. And so this extra pineal melatonin is something that works on the gut. So the gut is on a circadian rhythm, just like you are. And so what the microbiome is basically has a sleep wake cycle as well. And so when at night, when melatonin is secreted from the gut, it stimulates something called microbiome swarming. This is the primary driver for your microbiome to grow and proliferate. And what's really fascinating is melatonin not only stimulates your own microbiome to swarm and to grow and regenerate itself, but it suppresses all the bad ones and supports only the good ones. And so the gut chapter in Melatonin Miracle is probably one of the most fascinating, talking about these things, because the studies on like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and a number of different gut conditions is just profound on how well melatonin works just for that.
Wow. So, and I know you want to get into, we've talked about the conversation easily goes to sleep. I'm assuming, and what I've watched is that I've seen some people, you take this and then in a few minutes, they're asleep. Even if they're watching television, they're asleep. And I know in my practice and in my life, sleep is such an important issue for a lot of people, mostly because of the cortisol level and the stress in their lives. I'm up here in Jersey, and not that we're more stressful than anywhere else, but we tend to be a little more wound up, right? So stress, anxiety, aches and pains, inflammation. So obviously melatonin is going to help with that. But I know you're excited about talking about the not so known things about melatonin, especially in your book. There's so many chapters on just about everything when it comes to chronic illness, inflammation, pretty much anything anybody would be dealing with that I've met in my practice. You hit on in this book. So let's talk about some of the things that people wouldn't expect melatonin to be helping, and some of the things you've seen it do for you.
Well, I think infections is probably one of the most shocking. We talked about the gut and skin. For skin, I can tell you, we just launched a skin cream called Mito Skin. And, I had to beta test it for the last year, but people come up to me and they just can't believe how much different my skin looks. But
there's two guys talking and I'm like, and I'm looking, we're the same age. You got less wrinkles than I do.
Yeah.
You're in Florida.
We're
How
both
doing
51, right? And yeah, so it's nice to see you. It's nice to get younger or start looking younger, right? It feels good. So with infection, they did a study with this really, really lethal virus called encephalitis virus. And it causes the blood vessels to just basically explode. Same thing with COVID. It's the same exact thing. If you look at under a microscope, the blood vessels are just obliterated with people that when COVID goes into that cytokine storm. And so this encephalitis virus, the mortality was 90, I want to say like in the high 80s to low 90 percentile, meaning they injected this pathogen into these animals and like 90% of them died, right? Then they repeated it and they gave the animals melatonin, and only like, I think it was only like 6% died. Like it was just profound. So what it does to protect you from infections is incredible. They even did a study in Canada where they found that melatonin prevented the transmission of this pandemic virus by 54%. You know, the V doesn't even prevent the transmission. I think melatonin would have been a better answer than, you know, all the jabs.
I believe so too. So let's leave it at that. I mean, many people have gotten knocks on their door in the past couple of years, right? For just nonsense, right? How do we manage to get our immune system and our health to a place where we could deal with things like this, but we should be able to have conversations about it without having.
Well, I call it the internal mask, right? Nobody's talking about the internal mask. You know, first of all, the external mask, you know, there's a lot of controversy whether they even work or not. But a strong immune system, you know, and I think I went on with Patrick one time. We did a short interview when the pandemic started, and we talked about some immune boosting ideas. But you know, I think that's an important conversation. You know, it's melatonin is something that I'm so excited about, but you know, vitamin D is really important as well. Zinc, looking at your zinc to copper ratio is something that's really important. You know, here at our clinic, we really do a thorough evaluation of people. We look at heavy metals, we look at different infections that they might have. We look at inflammatory markers that a lot of doctors don't even look at. In fact, often when we get these lab panels back, people are shocked because they've been getting labs from their doctors for years, but nobody's ever found anything. And then all of a sudden we have, you know, red mark after red mark. It's like, okay, well, we actually tested some viable, you know, metrics. And so, you know, what I love about melatonin is that I can prescribe it to almost all of my patients and be certain that they're going to get some better. That's the confidence I have as this being as one of the core therapeutics that we use here at the clinic.
Well, what you're saying, it sounds like a magic bullet. It sounds like most people are not even know that they're low on melatonin, and it would be very interesting to see. I'm sure it's phenomenal to watch people's lives change when you start to get those levels up to where they're supposed to be, how it knocks out. You know, kind of like chiropractic, start adjusting people, and things start changing that you never thought would happen because their body's functioning
right
the way it was supposed to, right?
Well, you know, what I think is fascinating is, you know, I have this conversation with a lot of my brother chiropractors, and we talk about the innate immune system, right? And the idea that the body is a self-healing, self-regulating machine. I mean, it has the wisdom to heal itself, right? We were taught as chiropractors that we can remove the interference to that expression through maintaining, you know, this healthy spine, right? And so here, I also do a lot of cranial work, and Patrick and I will always debate back and forth upper cervical versus cranial. And, you know, it's kind of fun to talk with those ideas, but, you know, these are structural considerations, right? So there's a lot more considerations in today's world because it's all about the stressor, right? So a subluxation, which is a misalignment in the vertebrae, can cause a stress to the system where we don't adapt as easily, right? And so when you start getting down to the nitty-gritty, it's the amount of energy that we have to fuel the expression of that innate immune system and that innate, you know, system that runs all of our biological processes that's all important, and that is the mitochondria. And so it's important for us to look at all the potential stressors. I feel like it's my job as a doctor when patients come to see me my job is to figure out all the stressors that this patient has, and then to start teasing apart each one of those and reducing them or eliminating them. And I believe that at the core of all diseases practically is infections or toxicity or both. And those, again, as we talked about, are triggering the inflammation that are shutting down the energy production. And that energy deficit is expressed with each individual uniquely. So one person might develop an autoimmune disease to their thyroid. Another one might get cancer. It's just depend on your unique makeup and your environment. But at the core, the most upstream consideration is this mitochondrial conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's the same philosophy as chiropractic. You're looking to see where the blockage is in that person's ability to express itself. You're taking it to a whole other level cellularly, which is it's fascinating to me. It really is, to practice the way I did pretty traditionally, and then to meet somebody who's really looking at those systems and how the power that made the body heals the body. But when there's blockages in that, whether it be a low level of melatonin or some other toxicity, then if we can clear that out, we get to see that expressed. And you're doing that at your clinic. So tell us about the clinic. Tell us about ways to stay connected to you, what you're doing down there. If people wanted to visit you there, maybe ways to connect with you online. And obviously, how do we get some of this therapeutic dose of melatonin so we can try it?
Yeah, so we're in Sarasota, Florida. We actually, beginning of the year, moved into a 15,000 square foot location just outside of downtown. We have a large clinical side, and we're actually going to have apartments and event center, and we're really creating kind of a community here. So we're going to be holding events. Message Dr. Gentempo, tell him you want him to fly down to Sarasota and do some sort of presentation here. Kind of put a bug in his ear. I'm going to be encouraging him as well. But yeah, so our website is advancedrejuvenation.us. And on Instagram, you can find me at Dr. Mitozen, doctor spelled out. And so you can reach us. I do consultations for difficult cases. Most of the cases that we see here are more difficult. We do a lot of regenerative orthopedics. Spines, rotator cuffs, different types of arthritises, and we use a variety of different types of stem cells and ultrasound guided PRP and so forth. So it's a big part of our practice here as well. And you can see all that on the website, and feel free to reach out to us. And then the Sandman is, well, let's do a discount code.
All these links will be below the video, by the way, so don't spell them out, but I'll make sure they're included. But
yeah, we'll have a link, and we'll have a discount code if anybody wants to try the melatonin.
That sounds fantastic. So the book is called the Melatonin, the Miracle Molecule. You can get it on Amazon, I assume. I know it came out in hardcover recently.
Yes. Yeah, we hit #1 bestseller the other day. So it's really nice to see how excited people are getting over this message.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely recommend. I'm gonna grab a copy myself, because this has absolutely blown me away. It's given me this weekend, as I did my research before this interview, it was really eye-opening to realize that there's things around that we could be doing, and if we just found out, read the right books, met the right people, and we tried these things, it can make a big difference in our lives. So the book is Melatonin, the Miracle Molecule. Dr. John Lieurance, thank you so much for spending time with our community again today. Always a pleasure to talk to you and hear about what you're up to.
Dr. David Moore, I'm so happy to be on here. Great interview. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, brother. See you soon. Have a great day.